We call the Colerain Township Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, June the 18th, 2019. It is 6:02 p.m. If everybody would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commission members and staff members, if you would make sure that your microphones are on, please. And before we proceed with the agenda, we ask everybody in the audience to please silence their electronic devices, telephones, and so forth. We have a roll call, please, Mr. Kaler.
Mr. Faring?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. McMullen?
Here.
Mr. Westfall?
Here.
Mr. Grody?
Here. Okay, we have two sets of minutes to approve this evening. If you would look at both of them, and we will entertain separate motions for each of the separate minutes. So the first one for February the 19th, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of February 19th, 2019.
Second.
It's been motioned and approved to approve the minutes for February 19th, 2019. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Moving on, if we could have a motion for the approval of the May 21st, 2019 minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of May 21st, 2019.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve those minutes. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Staying is not here.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Those two sets of minutes stand as approved. The next item on the agenda is public address. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on any topic that is not on the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on. Final development plan, there is none. Okay. Moving on to our public hearings, we have the first case, number ZA 2019-01, the Energy Element, Colerain Township 2019 Comprehensive Plan. The staff have a report, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Grody. What is before you this evening, and you had in your packets, is the first step in our incremental approach to comprehensive planning. Our comprehensive plan is in dire need of updating. The last time we had an update adopted was in 2005. In an effort to do this in-house, because we do have the expertise to do a lot of this in-house, we've decided to do this incrementally based on the effective elements of a comprehensive plan as identified by the OKI Council, or Regional Council of Governments. In starting this process, back, I believe it was in late 2017, we were actually awarded a grant to work with OKI as well as the Greater Cincinnati Energy Alliance to create the energy element of the comprehensive plan. So this was a collaborative effort. Energy would not probably be where we would typically start with a comprehensive plan, but given the grant award and the assistance of OKI and the Energy Alliance, we thought this was a good place, as good a place as any to get started. So tonight we have Andy Meyer from OKI as well as Rob McCracken from the Greater Cincinnati Energy Alliance to present to you the highlights of the energy element. I do want to note that this plan element was crafted with the use of a 7-member committee made up of individuals from Colerain Township to provide their input, and so they were instrumental in helping to craft the recommendations in this plan. So we'd like to thank them. They are listed in that document. But from there, I'd like to turn it over to Andy Meyer from OKI, who will present to you the highlights.
Okay.
Okay,
Sir, if you would, for the record, state your name, please, and your affiliation with whom.
sure. Andy Meyer, Senior Planner with OKI Regional Council of Governments.
Thank you.
And, okay. As Jenna mentioned, we worked with the township to craft the energy element along with Greater Cincinnati Energy Alliance, and Rob McCracken from the Energy Alliance is here as well. Drafting portions of a community's comprehensive plan is not typically what we do or get involved in at OKI. We typically limit ourselves to a support role, providing data and other support in communities' efforts in doing their own planning. However, we updated our elements document 2 years ago, the elements document that Jenna referred to here. And at that time, we added 3 new elements, including an energy element representing emerging topics that are currently coming to the front in the planning profession today. About that same time, we at OKI were awarded a grant to produce 8 energy plans for local communities in Southwest Ohio to serve as model plans for demonstrating what energy planning could do for a local community. So we selected 8 communities. Colerain was selected. And I want to mention that the grant also includes $15,000 of money for each community to begin implementation of their energy plans. Really, it's impossible to overstate energy's importance in a local community. It's something that we often take for granted. You turn on the light switch and the lights come on, but it provides so much and touches so many things in a community, from housing to transportation, economic development, that it is really a topic that should be considered in conjunction with all of the other elements of a comprehensive plan. As Jenna mentioned, the planning process involves staff and a dedicated steering committee. And we also incorporated meaningful public involvement through a survey which elicited 71 responses. And the data from that survey is included in the appendix of the document. We also have a website which housed and presented information about the plan and details throughout the planning process. We held an open house at Northgate Mall to bring the different energy topics to the community. And we also incorporated social media, the Township e-newsletter, and Facebook messaging that reached 2,200 residents of Colerain. The draft before you contains numerous recommendations that can be summarized into 3 categories. First is encouraging energy efficient improvements in existing homes and businesses to address community needs, bolster investment in the community, and to address energy burden. Second, promote new development that's energy efficient. And third, provide facilities and opportunities for travel in the township by walking, bicycle, or other non-motorized vehicle, or using bus transit to reduce the reliance on single car trips. So In addition, many of the recommendations contained in this chapter have ties or are expected to have ties to other chapters in the forthcoming comprehensive plan update. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you may have about the draft.
Commissioners, any questions?
I have a slight question. When I was reading through it, I read something in reference to incentives, and I would like for you to address who gets the incentive and why.
Okay. Did you have a specific incentive?
Well, I mean, it was a section in there that talked about incentives, and it said for, I think it was homeowners and landlords, and so that's sort of on that path, to use energy efficiently.
Right. There are numerous energy efficiency incentives currently out there available and targeted towards different sectors of the economy, if you will. Many are targeted towards homeowners. Duke operates a number of these incentives. There's a PACE program which provides financing primarily to business owners and commercial building owners as a means to finance energy efficient improvements. There's the Home Weatherization Assistance Program, which is targeted towards low-income individuals to help them weatherize and improve the energy efficiency of their homes, be it whether they're homeowners or renters. So we've kind of tried to gather all of those applicable existing incentive programs that are out there and catalog those in the plan and identify gaps where certain populations or certain needs of township residents or businesses aren't being met by the existing menu of incentives.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commission members? Okay, Mr. McRackle, did you want to make a comment or any? Okay. Okay. At this point, due to the fact that, thank you, sir. Due to the fact that this is going to become part of our comprehensive plan, we need a motion to open the floor for public hearing. So if I could have a motion, please.
So move.
I'll second that.
Okay. If we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall? Mr. Grody?
Aye.
Yes. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this particular item regarding the energy element? Okay, hearing none, if we could have a motion to close the public hearing section, please.
So move.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing portion for this item. If we could have a roll call.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Aye.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. So, Ms. LeCount, at this time, you are looking for an approval of this via a motion from the commission?
Staff's recommendation is for acceptance of the energy plan element into the 2019 Colerain Township Comprehensive Plan. The one thing that I did not note was that Mr. Grody had gone through the plan with a fine-tooth comb, and there are some typographical and grammatical errors that he caught for us, and we will update that before it is forwarded to the Board of Trustees for their final adoption.
Okay. If we could have a motion to, regarding this particular item on the agenda?
I make a motion that we accept case number ZA 2019-01, energy element of the Colerain Township 2019 comprehensive plan as presented.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Are there any further questions from commission members before we call for a roll? Hearing none, if we could have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Ferring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes, the motion carries. Moving on, we go to case number ZA 2019-02, text amendment, small cellular telecommunications facilities. The staff have a report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Grody. This text amendment before you this evening has come about because in late 2016, the township was actually approached by a third-party, non-utility telecommunication company looking to put mini towers within township rights-of-way. The challenge with this was that we didn't really have a permitting process. We really didn't have any way to say whether or not we were in favor of this or how we wanted to regulate this. There were a couple different towers that were presented to the township, and they ranged from 80 to 120 feet in height, and they were calling these mini cell towers. They wanted them right within our township rights-of-way. So in early 2017, the Board of Trustees signed a resolution for a moratorium on small cell technologies and renewed that in 2018 to allow for state law changes to be finalized. They were finalized in the fall of 18. So staff worked directly with one of the major cellular carriers to craft language that would be beneficial to both those cellular technology companies that are looking to institute 5G technology, as well as beneficial to the township, who is very interested in being one of the first movers in 5G technology with respect to community-wide. Very briefly, I've borrowed a graphic from the interwebs to help explain the difference between our the macro towers and then the small cell towers. What we're looking at this evening are these small cell tower technologies that really help bridge the gap for data users on your smartphones. The main tower, the large towers that you see now are not what we're addressing tonight. There's plenty of other discussions to be had about that, but those carry mainly your telephone calls from your cell phones. So we're looking at these small cell poles. If you're not familiar with them, this tends to be what they look like. So you can see them on the far left there on top of that light pole. Looks like maybe a file cabinet kind of up there. It's about that size. You can see this on the side of another existing pole in that next picture. Close-up of what some of them can look like. They don't all look the same. And then, of course, on the right there, it's actually on a decorative lamppost. So just to give you an idea of what some of these look like, we don't have specs for exactly what we anticipate seeing in Colerain at this time. So we have crafted language to attempt to regulate that before we get any sort of influx and just kind of a proliferation of these without any regulation. So in order for this text amendment to be effective within our code, there are 4 different sections of the language that will change. Section 7.2, permitted residential uses, we will see the use table change. Same with section 8.1, where we will see the permitted uses change within the permitted business uses. We are now recommending adding section 12.13 for small cellular telecommunication facilities, and then defining this in section 16.2. It's hard to regulate if we don't define it first. So just a quick reminder of the types of uses that we have in our use table. I want to draw your attention to that second one there. Permitted uses with conditions. That is what we are recommending for this evening within these sections. So first we started by defining small cellular telecommunication facilities. And if it's okay with you, I will just call them small cells from here on out. It's a lot of words. I'm not going to read that for you, but essentially making sure that we covered this. We did work with that major carrier as well as borrowing language from some neighboring communities. Some are regulating, some are prohibiting, but nonetheless, we work to try and use language that's already out there and then kind of tailor it to our needs. So there's the definition that we recommend adding to section 16.2. This is a blurry, but nonetheless an image of table 7.1, I should say, placing small cells as a use in that table, permitted with conditions in all residential zoning districts. And then you'll see that it references section 12.13. Same thing happens in table 8-1, permitting small cells in B1, B2, B3, O1, and I1 as permitted with conditions, again referencing section 12.13. The language of this text amendment was provided in your packet, but I want to try and run through the highlights, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this. First, we'll hit applicability. We are looking to permit these within the right-of-way, utility easements, and even on private property when a permit application comes through us. This is so long as the criteria of the rest of this section is met. So we're recommending that this be an administrative process through your zoning department to permit these when these applications come in. General standards, this is kind of the meat of what we're looking to regulate here. Anywhere that has underground utilities, we are looking for mini cells to be co-located on existing mast arm signals only. So if things are underground, in our commercial areas, we want to continue to see that there's not visual clutter above ground. We want to see them co-locate on those existing mast arms. Think intersection of Colerain and Springdale. A lot of money was spent to get those utilities underground there. We would hate to see, I would imagine that might be a popular intersection where we might want to see a boost in data levels at different times of day. We would really dislike seeing any sort of new tower pop up in that area. We're looking to have a maximum height of 30 feet. Section B does address the idea of locating these on existing infrastructure where it's present, addresses screening, site distances, and regulates no lighting or noise can be emitted from these towers. There's also a section there on permitting these outside of the right-of-way. That section discusses the setback requirements if this will be on private property or within those utility easements, and that they must be on decorative poles with screening. Appearance, generally we're looking for it to be consistent and complementary. I would imagine that in the future, if we see an abundance of these come in and we find that there's one standard type that we might want to see, we may see a further text amendment that would indicate exactly what that what those specs would be. But for now, we don't have that, so we're looking for consistency. If utilities are underground, it must be underground. If utilities are above ground, we don't want to see a completely different character than what we might have going on in a particular area. And then all others would be prohibited. Section 12.13.3 addresses co-location or shared use, and essentially requiring the applicant to provide documentation of the need, as well as efforts to minimize proliferation of these throughout the township. And then section 12.13.4, this is actually a typo in your staff report. I believe it was listed as 0.3, it's 0.4. Abandonment essentially identifies that if there's 12 consecutive months without use, it is deemed abandoned and the owner is required to demolish it within 180 days. One text change that we do need, this was not reflected in your packet. We had this in here as the township or agent of the township would demolish within 180 days, and then it would be essentially the cost would be attributed to the owner or an agent of the owner. We've changed that based on staff recommendation from the Regional Planning Commission that we just clean that up and that it be the owner who's responsible for it. Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission did unanimously vote for approval, and then their staff did note that desired change in that abandonment language. your staff's recommendation is approval as modified in this presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions the board might have at this time.
Commission members, any questions,
I don't have
comments?
any, no.
I got one. I just have one, Jenna. Can somebody actually put one of these in their own private backyard?
If it meets the justification, or the criteria of section 12.13 and they receive the proper permitting, yes. That would be, so the reason that we're here is because there was a desire to put these in the rights of ways. When the township asked these third-party non-utility carriers, well, why aren't you putting it on the building immediately adjacent rather than in the right-of-way? And essentially it comes down to they do not want to have to get into lease agreements with landowners or building owners to be putting their materials on other people's property. So they didn't want to get into the cost associated with that and all of the negotiations associated with that. So it is possible, but it's not necessarily likely that that's what's going to happen.
Would a facility or a company like Duke charge them rent for using their utility pole?
They may.
Who would be primary users of these types of devices?
The major cell phone carriers are the ones who would be owners and operators of them, and then you and I and everybody else that passes by using our smartphones are utilizing the technology. So my understanding of it is that we will see kind of peaks and valleys in the usage of it, and you'll see certain areas when you're in very busy areas where you drop calls or you drop the ability to connect to the internet. It's because there's a data shortage in that area. The connectivity that would be where a small cell would be appropriate to boost that, and it's only during certain times of day. So think Colerain Avenue, very busy time of day, certain intersections. That's where you would likely see a lot of these come in.
Any other comments or questions for Mrs. LeCount? Ms. LeCount?
I do. So is it more feasible then that it would be in just populated public areas rather than residential?
It is more feasible at this time, but I think if we're moving to be a truly 5G community, we could see them in a number of different places. It just depends on where the technologies go. I can tell you that first third-party provider that came in wanting to do 180-foot and 120-foot pole was saying that was as small as they could go, and now we're talking some of them well under 30 feet in height. So the changing technology could change that.
And then there's just been some discussions on Facebook, so I just want to clarify or ask. So if there is a utility pole on private property, obviously it's not owned by the resident, could the resident then not want this mandated on that pole right outside of where they're living?
If it's a public utility pole, there's likely a utility easement. It would be the utility company that would have that negotiation with this carrier about whether or not to locate that. So the private property owner would likely not be involved in that, but I mean, I can't talk about every situation.
Right.
Generally, the utility poles are not owned by the individual homeowners.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? And commission members, just so you're aware, each of the 5 items under number 5 will require a public hearing session again. So, Mr. Solomon, may I ask a technical point? Do we need to go through the motion and second to open and close public hearing, or can I just ask, is there anybody who wants to speak?
I would go through the process.
Go through the due process, okay. Then we need a motion to open public hearing, please.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If we could have roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this particular item?
I didn't sign up, but am I allowed to speak?
Yes, sir, if you'd just come forward. Sir, if you'd come forward, please, and state your name. And if you wouldn't mind, spell your name for our record, please.
Kylan Peck, it's Kylen.
Okay.
I was curious, how many of these are we actually putting in, and is anyone aware of the health risks that 5G associates? Because there are a lot of theories out there that 5G causes cancer, and all these cell phone towers are not very health beneficial. So before anybody voted on that, I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention.
Has there been
Do we know how many
anything?
we're going to be putting in the township?
It
Or
would,
are they going to be voted on as they come through?
no, this would be a permitting process,
So then they'd get a permit, as long as they paid the money to get their permit, they'd get to do what they want to do?
and they meet the criteria of section 12.13.
So once they vote on this, people like Duke can do whatever they want, put these in wherever they need?
No,
So like T-Mobile, Verizon, they can team up with Duke and
Based on,
basically do whatever they want?
based on the criteria
as long
listed
as
in
they got the
section
money to do it?
12.13.
Okay. Just curious.
They would have to follow through the procedures that would be put in place
Right,
in
but what
order
we're
to get
voting on
it.
right now is to make it eligible for them to do, and these companies with a lot of money are gonna be able to do whatever they want. So these towers are gonna go in everywhere, wherever they feel like putting them in, residential areas, neighborhoods, Colerain Avenue.
Okay.
And there is a health risk associated with them, so I thought you guys should maybe be aware of that before voting.
Do you have anything with you that speaks to
I did not,
that?
I just came to listen, and I heard that there were some towers being put in, and I was kind of concerned about it, but there is a lot of evidence out there that 5G is not good.
Okay. Ms. LeCount, in your research and work with this, have you come across anything of that
It's not
nature?
something that we researched
Okay,
in this process.
okay. Anything else, sir?
I think that's it.
Thank you kindly.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who wishes to speak to this item? Okay, if we could have a motion to close public session, please.
So move.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public session on this. We could have roll call, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes?
Mr. Ferring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Okay. Before moving on to the third topic, I am remiss in my manners.
You need to vote.
We need to vote on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. We need a motion to, in relation to this particular case. If somebody's prepared to do so.
I make a motion that we accept case ZA 2019-02, text amendment, small cellular telephone facilities as presented.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the proposal that is on the table right now. Any further discussion from the commission members? Hearing none, if we could have roll call, please.
Mr. Ferring?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes?
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Grody?
Yes, the motion carries. Now back to the comment that I was going to make, and I apologize, gentlemen, for Mr. Meyer and Mr. McCracken for not saying this earlier, but thank you for coming, and please thank all the people who were instrumental in putting the energy element together. It represents a lot of hard work. And also, Ms. LeCount, if you would thank the members of the committee that you worked with in relation to this.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I want you to know that I found it to be very interesting reading as I sat in the beach chair on the beaches of Outer Banks last week. So,
Rub it in.
okay, all right, the next item is case number ZA 2019-03, text amendment of referrals to Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. Staff, do you have a report?
We do, thank you, Mr. Grody. Recent changes in state law removed the mandatory nature of the current Regional Planning Commission review process. And so what you see before you is a pretty simple text amendment, but it makes some pretty big changes for us. It will provide us the opportunity to expedite the development review process when appropriate, and essentially we can choose to use the Regional Planning Commission for their review, and we can choose not to. So if approved tonight, what you'll see is an updated submission schedule, you won't see it, I'm sorry, the Board of Trustees will see an updated submission deadline schedule. We can move the process, the zone change process forward without about a month to a month and a half extra timeline for the Regional Planning Commission review. There are two sections that we are changing tonight, looking to change tonight. Section 4.3.2, review procedures. This is for text and map amendments. And then section 4.5.2, review procedures, ignore my typo there, plan development district review. It's pretty simple. We are looking to change the shalls to mays, and then adding a, if applicable, in there so that we still have the option to have the RPC review. But we are not required. So that's what section 4.3.2 looks like, and then the same in section 4.5.2. This was heard before the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission earlier this month, and it did receive a vote for unanimous approval. Staff's recommendation to you is approval as presented. Any questions for staff?
For me,
Yeah, what difference do the words shall and may make in terms of this whole project?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
What difference does the word shall and may make in terms of this administration?
Shall
Yeah.
requires us to do it. May says we can if we want to.
Okay.
I did notice in there where they are real happy about that. They're afraid we're gonna mess up their regional perspective.
I think it'll be important at different times to go to them for a regional perspective. I think that there are some different projects where we will want their regional perspective. I think one in particular may be our comprehensive plan elements. I think it's a good idea to make sure that we're in step with, on certain items with some of our peer communities and certainly at the county level. We don't want to be kind of going rogue on everything, but this does give us the opportunity to move more swiftly with the development plan review, which, as you know, many developers come in and, are interested in moving things along as quickly as possible, and staff is not looking to hold that up in any way, so.
Other comments, questions?
No.
Ms. LeCount, who will make that determination as to whether to use Hamilton County or involve them or not to involve them? At what level will that come?
I think for the most part, it's going to be at staff level. But, if there is a request from either this board or from the Board of Trustees, we can certainly accommodate that.
Okay. Then just a clarification item. I noticed in your project summary, it says it refers to home rule government. For the sake of those who picked up packets and may not understand what that is, can somebody in 10 words or less tell us what that means?
Well, from our perspective, a home rule pretty much typically is, as long as the statutes say if they prevent us specifically from doing it, in our opinion, we have the ability to do it if it's not specifically prevented, if that answers your question.
Okay.
There's statutory cities, there's home rule townships, so that's the easiest,
Okay.
I guess, perspective I can give.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we call for a motion on this particular item, we again need to open the floor for public session, so I need a motion, please.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to have a public session. Please call the roll, Mr. Kaler.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. McMullen?
yes.
Ms. McMullen? Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this particular item? Hearing none, can we have a motion to close the public session,
So
please?
moved.
I'll second that also.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Okay, now if we could have a motion from someone regarding this particular case?
I'll make a motion to accept case number ZA 2019-03 tax amendment.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion or question?
No.
Hearing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ferring,
Yes.
Ms. McMullen,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Westfall,
Aye.
Mr. Grody.
Yes, the motion carries. Moving on, we have case number ZA 2011-04, Panda Express. And the staff have a presentation, please.
Yes, this comes to you as an amendment to a preliminary development plan. That plan for Northgate Mall was adopted originally in 2011. You're familiar with the location. Northgate Mall is at the southwest corner of Springdale Road and Colerain Avenue. The particular outlot faces Colerain Avenue at the intersection of Mall Drive. Mall Drive is actually a private street owned by the mall owners. These are just some ground level. It is directly in front of the Ulta store, which was formerly part of the Dillards. This is a view from Colerain Avenue. It's directly opposite McDonald's. Another view, plan view. Currently, this lot has about 136 parking spaces. Back when this is the 2011 amendment to the mall plan, there was a recognition that there was much more remote parking that was needed, and that remote parking was proposed to be built out as individual pads for businesses. All of those pads have been constructed except for this one. This is the last of the outparcels to develop. And this is a close-up. And the key reason why this is before you as a preliminary development plan is that the original specifically called out a financial institution. Preliminary development plans deal with density, intensity, and use. And because that use was specified as in financial institution, the proposal is for a restaurant that's a different category of land use. So we're looking at this more from a broad perspective. This will need to come back to you as a final development plan, and that's when we really get into the code review for compliance of landscaping, lighting, architectural details, all that, that kind of detail. They did provide us with a plan. What you see on the screen is actually a plan that was approved for Huntington Bank. They went through the preliminary and final development plan process and got approval for this, but chose not to move forward on it. As you'll see with the Panda Express, there's the access point is at the same location off of the driveway in front of Ulta. There's a couple other accesses going to that'd be to the north. Circulation pattern, the bank had a drive-through. Panda Express is proposing a drive-through. So circulation and parking is actually fairly similar. This is the Panda Express layout that you have in your packets. A portion of the parking of this has been allocated for the Ulta store. Because when you come out the front door of Ulta, these are the parking spaces that typically get used. And we went through a parking calculation more just to assess feasibility for this site. They're required to have 15 spaces per 1,000 square feet. That comes out to 38 spaces. You can go 10% over the maximum. 18 of those spaces are for Ulta, so that leaves 53 for Panda Express, so they're over their minimum allowance. However, remember, they're reducing from 136 spaces that are there now. We don't particularly see that as a problem, but that will probably be a variance request with your final development plan. Also, we noted along with that, they're required to have landscape islands. These landscape islands are a little small for what is required. They're required to be at least 10 feet across and 135 square feet each. And the reason why I say that, they may lose a parking space or two trying to get those in. I'm not going to rule out that they'll be creative in coming up with solutions for this. But generally, it looks like they're meeting all the building setback, bulk requirements, the buffering requirements for the streetscape's been accounted for in this plan. So from a very broad or high level, we are recommending for approval of the major modification to the preliminary development plan to allow for the change of use of the property from financial institution with drive-through to restaurant with drive-through under the following conditions. Number one is that all of the conditions that were initially a part of that 2011 approval remain in effect for the zoning amendment area. That the final development plan be submitted in accordance with section 4.5.2 of the zoning regulations. I think I had in your staff report that this was approved by the Regional Planning Commission unanimously. They had a series of conditions. I think from our perspective, they were really jumping ahead to final development plan issues because they were looking at this almost code item line by line. Their points well taken, but they're not really addressed at this level of review. So we believe that the applicant has the ability to comply with the majority of our requirements, except for what we noted is they're probably over on their parking. Is there any questions regarding this plan?
Well, I do have a question. Because I don't eat out a lot, what do Panda Express sell?
It's Chinese food, primarily.
Okay, and my other question is, what's different in this proposal versus Huntington? What would have to be different?
The use is different. It's a different use category by our zoning code, from financial institution to restaurant.
Okay.
The site is very, very similar in terms of its circulation. Huntington Bank had actually triple drive-through lanes. This will only have one drive-through lane. So there's some differences. Our parking requirements for financial institutions is different from parking requirements of restaurants. So those are the kind of things that are changing with this proposal.
Nothing changes with the building, per se?
It'll be a different building from the bank building. Obviously, the building that for the bank was designed to be a financial institution. This will be designed to be a restaurant. The applicant actually has a presentation that shows you some illustrations of what the building could look like.
Okay. Thank you.
Could the applicant come forward, please, and make a presentation? And if you state your name, sir, and with whom you're affiliated?
My name is Henry Clover, K-L-O-V-E-R, and I am the owner of Clover Architects and have had the pleasure of working for Panda and with Panda for 25 years. And I would like to tell you you're in for a treat because it's one of my favorite Chinese restaurants. Panda started 1983 and on California in Pasadena. They opened a restaurant which was called Panda Inn, which was on the par of what you might think of like a P.F. Chang's. They developed orange chicken, and orange chicken is the #1 seller for them. They are referred to as a quick serve. They're very high in design. They're very really good people to work with, and so I'm very excited to bring it to you. But it is a situation, just to explain, the food is all basically set up on a series of walks that are on the line, and so when you come in, they ask you what you want, and then there's all the product is made, and it's being cooked right behind you at the same time. So if you've ever been to a Chinese restaurant and how quickly they cook things, they make quantities. Now, of course, the orange chicken is the #1 seller, and the wok is this big. So I'm very excited to bring it to you. So Marty did an excellent job of showing you where everything is, so I can skip through pretty quickly. Obviously, this was the overall orientation and location. A lot of what I get to do is dealing with old shopping centers and buildings that have parking lots that used to have requirements of 6 cars per 1,000 and have changed. And so this is very, very common for us to come and take over corners of parking lots and shopping centers and a lot of Walmarts, for example. Next slide, please. Blow up closer, which, as I said, Marty did an excellent job of locating. It's on the very corner across from McDonald's of the Mall Entrance Drive. Next, please. This shows you access points. It's something we have to provide the Panda every time in terms of the intersections. So there's a main intersection which is signalized. And then there's a T, which is very common to get to the McDonald's to the left or the Panda to the right. And the access points are aligned. Next, please. It also, well, actually, the previous slide showed you what the previous proposal was, and we have made some adjustments at the request to get the parking in the rear. I now understand what we need to do for the landscaping, so we'll work on that and change the parking count. Have that discussion, but one of them was to add pedestrian access, which is the line you see on the corner to get back to it. The circulation would be that they access point for the drive-through. Drive-throughs have to go to the left for obvious reasons, so there would be 8 stacking that would come from the north side to the south and then across the front to the front corner of the building. Next slide, please. I can't, I'm sorry, my eyes are not good enough to read that, but I'll pull my own copy out here and read it. These were dealing with each one of the staff comments, and it's more in line with keeping just that we understand that there are stipulations that are on the property, and we understand we need to deal with them. But a couple of them were general in nature. Marty made us understand, because first you get them and like, well, what are we supposed to comply with? But it's their standards for the shopping center that stay in existence, and so we understand that, and we're more than happy to work with staff. Staff has been great to work with so far. So the next slide, please. Staff condition number 2, which had to do with the thoroughfare, and we understand there's no change to that as well on this, but obviously there's a comment, so we wanted to put it out there. The comment number 3, or condition number 3, had to do with the percentage of open space, and obviously we'll be improving that as we work through with staff on the final development plan. Obviously the islands are going to get bigger. We need to get islands for trees as well as the sidewalk across the front, so we'll work on that with staff as well. Next slide is the site lighting, which is not something to review at this point, but we want to let you know that we're starting to work on it, and we're going to try and get with Marty and get it all cleaned up as quickly as possible. And then the next was just as a more of a cursory, so you see it. Panda Express has what they refer to as the front of the sign, the lines you see, which are labeled number A, which is the Panda Express. And the other one is what they call the lockup, and that's their big symbol for the restaurant. So people see that and they know that it's a Panda Express. They're very tasteful in their design, but we wanted to let you see it. I think my understanding is we're very close. The only thing is I think there's a little bit of shortage on the front sign that we may have to negotiate out with staff how to deal with it. But my understanding is we're very close on the signage, but we wanted to show it to you in advance so you'd have an opportunity. The next slide is the lockup itself, the size, and the thank you as well. Next slide is I'm moving. Next slide, please. This is the green buffer that we were asked to do, which is one of the stipulations, which we're more than happy to. The next slide shows the access to it. The reason for that is there is a retaining wall, so the only real access we have. Obviously, it would be preferred to come, directly across from the entrance. The entrance is on the corner of the building, but there's a retaining wall there, so really the only direct access is from the intersection, which also works, because that's where most people should be coming from anyways. Next slide shows the retaining wall, which Marty had excellent imagery there. The next one is the only one that I had that I've been requested to question, because the entrance is right there on the corner, and the guidelines require a street entrance directly toward the street. Now, obviously, the intent is so people aren't turning their back on it. And it might help to go kind of to the next one, was of the imageries of the building. And Panda is very design-oriented. The buildings are very attractive. They look really good at night, too, because those fins are all lit with LED, and the building's lit up at night. But in their design and philosophy, they like to keep a very linear progression. So I guess you might call it the Panda experience is the way they refer to it. The door is not facing the street, the main door. And obviously, it's a vestibule, so we can't have a door, but they have requested that I ask for your opinion on this, because they like to have what they refer to as the Panda experience, where you enter and you go straight toward the wall that has all the information on it and then turn in front of the counter. If put an entrance on the other side, it wouldn't be used as much because most of the parking's on the other side anyways. But it makes people come in and take a left as opposed to the experience of entering directly at the product information and wall. That is the entrance. That is, of all the things that are requested, all the things to work on, the only thing they asked me to consider and ask for permission on. It's not a matter of not having entrance on the street side, it's just it's on the corner. So I was asked to get feedback on that. So if we could go through the rest of the slides, you can see what the building looks like. That would be the street side with the Panda Express on the front. The next slide is the side facing toward McDonald's, which is where the drive-through window is. And then the next slide is the actual back of the building facing the Ulta Beauty. Next is the actual renderings that show you what the building looks like. And then I believe there's one more that shows you kind of an image. A couple more of different views, but then one at night so you can see what it looks like. And this is what the building is illuminated and looks like at night. And it's a very attractive building, and we're quite proud of it. With that said, we would request your consideration and approval so we may continue forward to work with staff on going to the final plan.
Thank you, Mr. Clover. Commissioners, any questions, comments of Mr. Clover?
Would you mind explaining one more time the question you're asking about the door? Like where?
The door is in this location on all typical stores, but where it's not is on, that's very good image, thank you. What they like is the Panda experience, where you enter the door, you go straight toward the displays, and then you turn right in with your delivery and all the walks with all the food and everything there. They from a feng shui standpoint, they do not like coming in and taking a left, and it's kind of their culture and what they'd like to do. So whenever we have the opportunity, I'm requested to ask that not be required, because this is occasionally we do run into this where, and for obvious reasons, people want the front doors facing the street, and so that people don't tuck their rear back to the street. But we're really not doing this. This is our prominent side. So I know it's a variance, would be a variance, but I've been requested to at least get some comment and opinion on that.
So is this something, Ms. LeCount, that would be dealt with at your level, or?
No, it would have to be a variance granted by the zoning commission.
Okay.
And it can be done at the final development plan stage.
The thought I would
But-
have, sir, is could you make it a double entrance? Take, on the Colerain side, take one of those windows out and make it a double
And it
entrance.
is absolutely possible, but that's not what they prefer to do. So that's the whole point is it something we should tell them they shouldn't try for, or is it worth a try? I guess is basically the question. Not making a decision tonight by any stretch of imagination, but I'm just looking for feedback.
That would be my only feedback, is consider a double entrance
Okay.
if it's required that there be a street side
Yes.
entrance. Other comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, we have to open the floor for public session, so if we can have a motion to that effect, please.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And Mr. Kaler, if we could have a roll call, please.
This is to open the public hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall? Mr. Grody?
Yes. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this particular item regarding Panda Express? Seeing none, can we have a motion to close the public session, please?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded to close public session. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Okay, if we could entertain a motion regarding this particular item on the agenda, please.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve case ZA2 2011 Northgate Mall for major modification to preliminary development plan.
This is regarding the Panda Express.
Regarding the Panda Express, yes.
Been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
With all conditions, with all conditions to be considered.
Okay. Did I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there, in your motion, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Faring, your second, is there any wordage in there that you're addressing the door issue?
Well, I would agree that it probably needs to be a double door.
Okay, but, I mean, you're not specifically putting anything in
No,
there.
because it's just preliminary.
You're saying as presented this evening.
Right.
So if we want that in there, we have to amend the motion, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You would need to amend the motion, but you don't need it in there. This is something that you could vote on at the final development plan
Yeah.
portion of this. So
It's not really before the committee tonight.
it would actually be my recommendation to hold off on that type of motion because we haven't officially reviewed any of the elevation drawings. Those
Okay.
were preliminary discussions that staff had with the applicant in this particular instance, and they are still ongoing discussions. So I would recommend that you hold off on that portion of it tonight, but it's certainly up to this board whether or not you do that.
So, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Faring, unless you change your motion, or you particular change the wording of your motion, it stands as you presented it with
Correct.
approval. You're recommending approval
Yes.
as was presented by staff?
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Faring, are you still
Yes.
seconding that? Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You understand that, sir? That
Yes, sir.
what happened? So it sounds like you have a sliver of hope hanging on, but,
Don't give up.
okay. Thank you very much, sir.
No, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Marty, thank you.
Okay, moving on the agenda, case number ZA 2012-01, Joseph Toyota. The staff have a presentation, please.
Yes, this also comes to you as a major modification to a preliminary development plan. The original preliminary development plan was approved in 2012 and called for, it was initially the demolition of 3 houses on Pool Road and conversion of that space into a storage lot for an automobile dealership that's adjacent to this, being Joseph Chevrolet. That original plan, well, this is a zoning map showing you that the dealership itself, the older part of the dealership, is Zone B2, which is general business, and then this Pool Road frontage section is planned development business. The view of the site showing the outline of everything that's under the control of the Josephs at this point. This is the final development plan, the landscape portion of what was approved back in 2012. There was a condition, actually there was quite a few conditions from the trustees on this. One was that originally they had proposed a drive entrance onto Pool Road at the west end of the site. Trustees voted to not allow that entrance onto Pool Road. There was a variance granted to allow them to not put internal landscape islands within this. Typical parking lot, at the end of each row of parking, you would have a tree island with landscaping in that, and that was a variance. Actually, these are all the variances in case we need to go back through them from the 2012 approval. They did require that all the parcels of this property be consolidated into a single parcel, which has been done. No additional signage. It's for automobile storage. Landscape plan has been reviewed and approved. There was a variance to allow for a privacy fence along Pool Road. Privacy fences are not typically permitted in the front yards of a commercial district. The idea was to basically screen this lot from view on Pool Road and also screen it from a view because there's a single-family house directly west on Pool Road. So there was a landscape strip plus privacy fence put along that single-family residence. Since that time, the Josephs have purchased this property. It was a former wig shop on Colerain Avenue, and they have recently demolished that. That's in the after picture. Also to the far right, there was a single-family house, and that single-family house was actually included in the original plan development, but it was specified to remain as single-family dwelling. So that's the reason why there needs to be an amendment to the original plan development, because again, like with this last case you looked at, there's a change of proposed use of that site. It's now being proposed as additional auto storage space. Just another aerial view, you can see the house that's since been demolished. There's a couple businesses right at the corner of Pool Road and Colerain Avenue that are not part of this discussion. Those are both Zone B2 general business. This is the development plan that was submitted for your review tonight. It is showing that additional parking space in what was the wig shop and that single-family residence. A little closer view of that. Just to throw the zoning lines on top of it, a portion of this is considered an amended or planned development business because of that change of use and adding the parking spaces, and then an additional area is being expanded onto the 2012 area, and that's that wig shop. Actually, it's just a portion of the wig shop. The very back corner of that was included in the original 2012 amendment. There is a request, or the proposal has to keep one of the drive entrances on Colerain Avenue from the wig shop. It's actually only about 10 feet wide. That would be considered a non-conforming driveway. We require 24-foot width minimum. However, we noted, let's see if I get to it. These are the existing curb cuts on Colerain Avenue. Those curb cuts, I have it in the staff report, basically come out to the equivalent of 7 lanes of traffic. They have them striped actually as 9 lanes of traffic. The one coming directly opposite Compton Road is basically 6 lanes wide, which is like wider than Compton Road. So staff strongly believes in the sense that ODOT is trying to eliminate curb cuts wherever possible to try to channelize traffic on Colerain Avenue. We think the existing 2 curb cuts on the site are more than sufficient to provide adequate access to this property. So our recommendation is to eliminate the non-conforming curb cut. Staff's recommendation is for approval of the request subject to the following conditions and variances. Excuse me. Number 1, that the provisions of the previous approval of case CA 2012-01 contained in Colerain Township Trustee Resolution 29-12 be continued. That additional right-of-way be dedicated on Colerain Avenue as required by the Ohio Department of Transportation. I should mention that the applicant believes that ODOT will not be requiring additional right-of-way dedication, but that needs to be documented. That a 15-foot wide landscape buffer be required on the Colerain Avenue street frontage for section 14.5.1. Number 4, that a 10-foot wide buffer be required between the proposed development and the B2 properties located at 9017 Colerain Avenue and 9035 Colerain Avenue per section 14.5.2. The plan does actually show that strip, but with the final development plan, we would need to actually see what screening material is being proposed. Number 5, that both existing driveway accesses for 9051 Colerain Avenue building be eliminated. Those are the former wig shop driveways. Number 6, that access to parking spaces must be from an access drive per section 13.4.2D. As they had proposed them, I hesitate to even go back to it, but they had like maybe 2 parking spaces that didn't have that adequate backing space because they had another car parked behind it. So that would comply with code if they eliminated, I think it's just 1 parking space. Number 7, that all parcels be consolidated into 1 lot. That's a carryover from the previous approval. Number 8, that no additional signage be allowed for the property. That's a carryover from the original approval. Number 9, that a public sidewalk be provided on the Pool Road frontage for the frontage of the former house at 3434 Pool Road per section 13.4.2A. With the previous approval, there was a waiver granted for the 3 houses that were demolished, that they were not required to build the sidewalk, but they had to pay into a sidewalk fund that has been set up by the township. Since that time, we have reevaluated priority areas for sidewalks. Pool Road has been identified as one of those priority areas. So even though it's a sidewalk only in front of 1 property, we believe that it's pretty imminent that sidewalks are going to be constructed on Pool Road. And then variances. This is also a continuation from the previous approval, that a variance be granted to section 14.6.2 to allow for the elimination of internal landscape islands. And number 2, that a variance be granted from section 12.8.3 be granted to allow for the continuance of the privacy fence in the front yard setback of Pool Road. And that's on that lot where the house was recently demolished. So that is our recommendation. Are there any questions regarding this proposal?
I just have one, and it may be too early to ask. Does this require additional lighting on the property as well?
They will be proposing additional lighting on the property. Again, this will come back to you as a final development plan where, all the trees are identified, the fence, the lighting, all those details. Yeah.
We don't have sidewalks on the 2, was there 2 houses next to that were removed earlier?
There were 3 that were removed back in 2012.
Well, so there's no sidewalks there, but this latest one, we would have sidewalks.
Yeah, that's our recommendation. They could pay into the fund, but then we'd be immediately going back and doing it. So while they're doing all the construction, and
Right.
It would make sense to put the sidewalks in now.
Are there sidewalks from there to the corner?
I don't believe
Is there a
so.
doctor's office there in the corner?
I don't believe that has sidewalks. They have almost continuous curves, actually. Where am I? No. I don't know if that's a sidewalk or not, but
Yeah, there is.
yeah,
There is.
yeah. It's parking.
Other questions of Mr. Kaler? Is the applicant?
Mr. President, I would just would request that anyone who's going to, I guess, provide testimony and be sworn in, I think we may have dropped the ball there earlier. We probably should have sworn people in, but I would ask that people, including Mr. Kohler be sworn in with respect to this public hearing.
Okay,
Okay.
including the applicant?
Yeah, aside from their attorney, obviously.
Okay, do you want to conduct that,
I
sir?
can go ahead and do that. If anyone who is intending to speak, whether it's in favor or against or at all, with respect to this hearing, please stand up, raise your right hand. Do you swear to solemnly tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you very much.
If the applicant would come forward, please, and state your name and your affiliation, please, and could you spell your name for the record?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Austin Musser, M-U-S-S-E-R. I'm an attorney with Frost Brown Todd here on behalf of the applicant. I will keep my initial comments really brief because nobody really wants to hear from the attorney. I'm sure you'd rather hear from the engineer and the owner representative tonight. I just want to thank staff for working with us. We've been through a number of iterations of the plan, site plan that ended up being in front of you. As a result of those conversations, I think we eliminated the vast majority of any real points of contention between ourselves and the staff recommendation. Not to bury, I won't bury the lead. We would still like to have that curb cut that's on Colerain Avenue. We're giving up to others, and as you'll hear from the engineer and the owner representative, we think that curb cut is important, not so much for getting people on the site, more for getting people off of the site. And then we'll probably have a point of clarification or question with regard to the dedication of right-of-way once we're done. But with having said that, I'd like to invite Mr. Jonathan Evans up to walk you through the site plan from the engineering perspective.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Jonathan Evans with Evans Engineering at 4240 Airport Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45226. Good evening. Thank you for taking your time to be here to hear this case. From an engineering perspective, we're looking to obviously demolish the building and put in the parking that'll be used for vehicle storage. You can see from the photos they've clearly already demolished the buildings both on Pool Road and on Colerain Avenue. Excuse me there. So we would just be looking to on the Pool Road portion there. We'd be just looking to carry the same look or the same exact kind of layout of the parking spaces. They kind of go from east to west through there. Carry the landscaping through with the buffer along Pool Road, and then carry it up the east property line, continue down the south property line of what we refer to as a wig shop, do the 10-foot landscape buffer there, and then bring the 15-foot landscape buffer along Colerain Avenue. Of course, we'd look to deal with stormwater management through the county engineer's office and manage stormwater per their regulations. It'll all be captured on site, we'll do some detention within kind of near the wig shop area, which would be an expanded detention system of what was there, and then ultimately it connects to a system that goes to Colerain Avenue. With that, we'll, of course, as staff alluded to earlier, we would look to do lighting to go with the storage lot and additionally the wig shop area. So we'll work close with staff to kind of figure out the lighting needs and the plan for that. With respect to access management here, there were obviously curb cuts along Pool Road for each of the residential structures that were torn down several years ago. There's clearly one that's there now for the residential house that's been demolished. We initially we submitted with no curb cut there. Then in some meetings with staff, we kind of made some changes kind of during our process here. We proposed a curb cut along Pool Road because we felt that would be a good way to bring delivery vehicles in, at times. So and it would have flowed through the site and then exit back out to the signal that's on Colerain. We understood there was a lot of resistance to that and some conditions from the prior approval process, so we have eliminated that curb cut or the request for that curb cut along Pool Road, and I think we're agreeable to that. There were 2 curb cuts for the wig shop, and we kind of feel that it's pretty important to keep some access there. The one to the south that's there now does get a little bit close because it gets close to a curb cut that's there for the business that's south of the wig shop. So we agree that one could be a good one to get rid of. The one that we would request to keep is a little bit further to the north. It is narrow. Clearly, it was used in the past for the business that was there, but we feel it's pretty important to try to get vehicles exiting the site. And as you know, there are curb cuts clearly along Colerain, with the best being the signalized intersection at Compton, but it's kind of at a weird skew, and it can get kind of congested at certain times of the day when you have people waiting at the signal, wanting to turn left or northbound on Colerain. You got some people that want to go straight, maybe onto Compton. Not as much trouble with people wanting to leave on a right turn there. But there can get some congestion there at different times, during the business. So being able to get vehicles off the site, whether it's, people that come in for service or people that are leaving, and it truly is just a right out, maybe a right in only, right in, right out, because there's a concrete median that exists there along Colerain. So, it's a big site. There's a lot of vehicles on a daily basis that come and go from here, and we feel that, we're agreeable to eliminate a couple of them, the Pool Road one, and then one of the ones on on Colerain, but we'd really like to keep the one that's closest to the existing site now. So I think that's really it. I I certainly would entertain some questions from anyone that might have questions from an engineering perspective. I could also let Mark.
Jonathan, can you relate it to the commission, your conversation with ODOT?
Yes, so we did, early on, we reached out to both, because we had a request for dedication of property along Pool Road and along Colerain Avenue. And so we checked at the county engineer's office. They've confirmed what they want. We reached out to Doug Raiders, who's the right-of-way administrator with ODOT, and he's, we have an email back from him that states that they have no projects planned there and no intention to create or ask us to present any right-of-way to them. But in the future, if they want to reserve the right to acquire a right-of-way, that they want to be able to do so. But at this point, they would not ask us to dedicate any right-of-way. So, but we would look to put a 15-foot buffer in there, or to agree to the recommendation or the zoning code to put a 15-foot green space buffer through there.
Okay. Mr. Stein, would you want to make your presentation before we entertain questions up here?
Thank you. Thank you. Mark Stein, S-T-E-I-N, General Manager, Joseph Toda of Cincinnati. Thank you all for your time tonight. Thank you for your work so far on this project with us. The only thing I'd really like to add onto is the importance of the curb cuts to us. And if I can just give you an idea of the amount of traffic we manage on that lot every day. A typical Monday through Friday, we're going to have a minimum of 100 service customer appointments. Our 6-month busy time of the year, we're going to sell about 300 new and used cars a month. Monday through Friday, we're going to have anywhere between 90 and 100 employees also on that lot. We're going to do 10 to 25 parts deliveries. And then, you can't really account for how many customers are going to drive in, drive off. Different vendors that do different things for us are going to drive in, drive off, maintenance guys, but, so it's a lot of traffic. Even though those are as wide as they are at the length, functionally, every day, they're used for really 3 lanes, a turn in, and then 2 turnouts, one to the right and one either straight or to the left. So even as wide as it is, that's all the function we get out of that cut. When we bought that property, it had 2 driveways, neither one very usable to us. So we thought that we'd have the ability to just have one curb cut that was the proper width and made sense. That's a lot of people to navigate off our lot. Not everybody comes in at the same time, but we have a lot of people exit like maybe 5:30ish, 6 o'clock when service closes, then 8 o'clock when we close. The other thing is we encourage our customers to do right turns on test drives because, hey, the more left turns you have, the higher risk you have for an accident. So if we have that one extra spot where a customer can go out without congestion, because they're in a new car, they're in a car they've never driven before, they don't know where all the buttons are, they're a little nervous. So you want to make that whole experience for them as easy as possible so they don't pull out in front of somebody and have an accident. So that right turn is really pretty important to our business. The other thing is, obviously, the idea behind any expansion is to grow the business. Not that that's going to elevate our traffic a tremendous amount, but it will elevate our traffic on that a little bit. So I'm pretty passionate about needing that just for the safety of our customers, the safety of our employees. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Further comments, sir?
I'd just like to summarize, if I can, the two objections and the reasons for them. The one, as you've heard, is the curb cut. And I think you've heard Mr. Stein say that the existing curb cuts effectively function as 3 lanes of traffic out at best. And we do have a significant number of people that leave at the same time. We would be willing to consider certain conditions on that if the commission would like. Be willing to entertain some sort of restriction that it be a right out only. We'd be willing to entertain a restriction that certain times of day, that's when that access point would be used. We're not intending that to be a primary access point, but Marty, can you go to the overall site plan? I think it's your second to last slide.
Oh, overall, your overall plan is that one?
Yep. Effectively, what you've got here is between the 2012 PD and this application, you have about 3 acres of property that is being created to be landlocked. You're adding 3 acres of property to the site without adding any additional ability to get off of the site. That bottom curb cut is, really intended to be a release valve for traffic and congestion on the site. It's not intended to be a primary access point for the property. Frankly, as Mr. Evans mentioned, we preferred to get it a little further south, to get it further away from the existing right out that's there. But staff had a lot of concern that there's a dedicated left turn lane off of Colerain that's intended to go to the property just south of us. They expressed a lot of concern that if we had our access point too far south, people might try to do a little zigzag up Colerain to get to ours. We're happy to accommodate. We're happy, like I said, happy to widen the access point if we need to. But to us, that access point is critical. And I don't think that, even though you could theoretically get 7 lanes of traffic in and off of that site, that's not how it functions. And it's not realistic. So that's the access point. I won't belabor it. With respect to the dedication of right-of-way, I would just like some clarity as to what is intended with that. I don't think it would be fair, or I'm not even sure if it would be legal for this commission to impose an indefinite requirement that we dedicate right-of-way to ODOT at some point in the future if they ever ask without them paying anything for it. If the township has a concern about what may happen to the landscaping buffer, which was my understanding of the original concern was, hey, you've got your 15-foot landscaping buffer on the plan. What happens if ODOT says in a year from now, actually we want that 15 feet? Well, then our plan has no buffer anymore, right? Our site has no landscaping buffer. What we would propose if there are concerns about that, what we've proposed is that we'd be willing to accommodate a condition that says, if ODOT acquires any right-of-way from us at some point in order to widen Colerain Avenue or for whatever reason, we'll reinstall a 15-foot landscaping buffer on whatever property's left adjacent to that right-of-way. That way we can be compensated, frankly, for the taking of our property if that happens. And that way the township is still protected in terms of buffering along Colerain. So that's our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions any of the 3 of us that the commission might have, or sit down and be quiet.
Okay. Before we move on, Mr. Kaler or Mr. Solman, would you want to respond to Mr. Musser's most recent comment about the legality of the right-of-way that he was sharing?
Mm-hmm.
He was sharing that he did.
Sorry, I just said I'm not sure if it would be proper for the township to have an indefinite requirement to dedicate right-of-way someday in the future.
I mean, I don't need to respond to that.
Okay. Commission members, any questions, comments for the applicant?
Yes, I have one, and it may be for staff and him. I note in my reading that the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission was totally against it, and one of the concerns related to truck traffic, semi-truck traffic. Was that addressed, or can you address that, please?
I'd be happy to. They looked at a completely different site plan from the one that's in front of you now. That site plan had a curb cut on Pool Road, and it was intended to give the Toyota dealer an ability to bring trucks off, so they're not shuttling cars across Colerain Avenue, so trucks could offload on site and then go back out. We've nixed that entire site plan completely. There's no more curb cut. There will be no truck traffic on the site. That concern, we heard Regional Planning Commission loud and clear. My colleague covered that hearing and got beat up so bad he didn't want to come tonight. So, that's off the table completely.
Okay, but didn't you say you will have a lot of vendors coming in?
We already have a lot of vendors that come to the main dealer. They drop off parts, they drop off supplies for that. Auto trucks are typically offloaded off-site, and then the car's driven onto the site.
Okay, thank you.
Where are those transporters offloading?
I don't know for sure. I believe they're offloaded on another property that the Joseph Group either leases or owns.
Mr. Stein, can you speak to that?
Yes, they are offloaded really directly across the street at the signalized intersection. We have that property on Colerain. I think it used to be a bank maybe, but that's where they're offloaded at.
Is that the piece of land right adjacent to the car wash?
I believe it is correct. Isn't that directly adjacent to the car wash?
It's directly, it's at the southeast corner of Compton and Colerain.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's anything between that and the car wash. I don't think there is.
Well, there's a roadway between the car wash and whatever that.
Okay, yeah.
And I have seen that a number of times with 2 or 3 transporters there offloading, and it's difficult to try and get out there.
Offloading on the Target side of Colerain?
Yes.
Yes.
Right next to the car wash.
Okay.
And I would say, in an early iteration of the site plan, that was the purpose of us asking for a curb cut on Pool Road. Since that time, and that's what we sent to the Regional Planning Commission. Since that time, discussions with staff and as well as comment from the Regional Planning Commission made it very clear that nobody wants to curb cut Pool Road, even if that has the function of diverting truck traffic that way so that they can offload on site.
Yeah, that was our original idea that the Planning Commission didn't like.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for our applicant?
So I'm still trying to get some information from staff. Were these concerns that the Hamilton County Commission had addressed in the proposal that was presented to us?
I believe so. I need to review that list. That is. Do you have a copy of this? Oh. No, that's from 2012, the RPC concerns.
Site is divided by 2 zoning district classification. Another one of the concerns that they addressed.
Actually, that was one of our preliminary concerns. Ideally, when you do plan developments, they involve perhaps clusters of businesses that are all laid out in a uniform fashion. It's very rare that you would have only a segment of a business being zone plan development. Usually it's a business in its entirety. They're not proposing to make any changes to the B2 section of this property. The changes being proposed are, I shouldn't say 100%, because they do have to change the parking and circulation slightly in the B2 section to accommodate what's being proposed in the plan development portion of the property. But to bring it all into plan development would bring up a whole lot of code issues for conformance, things like streetscape buffer for the entire frontage. There's some nonconformities like a billboard on the property, things that we would, in an ideal situation, like to be able to address. But since they're nonconformities, they're already zoned single letter zoning, and that's basically not a part of the proposal in front of us. It's a little difficult to act on those elements of the site.
So do you have a general idea of why they were opposed to this?
Well, the truck traffic on Pool Road.
I mean, the whole thing, they said unanimously it was denial.
Yeah. It was a variety of issues.
I mean, have they been addressed in this staff's recommendation?
It's a different proposal.
Yeah, what they had was a different layout. Since that time, you remember we had the scheduled, withdrawn. That's the reason, is the denial of regional planning. They figured they're not going to bring that same proposal in front of this group. So they withdrew their request, redesigned, and then resubmitted. So what you're seeing is a different proposal from the regional planning. And they have addressed some of those issues.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant or staff at this moment?
Yes. For the existing driveway that you're wanting to keep, so you had mentioned around 300 cars sold a day, so a month, yes, you're right. So that would translate to about 30 test drives a day turning right out of.
I think a realistic test drive is probably about half of that. The big thing is our employees. You know, we have 90 to 100 employees. We have 110 service customers a day. So right there's 200 people to get off the lot, plus car customers, so to speak.
Okay, so the focus is more for your personnel, being able to get them off the lot, not utilizing the traffic light?
Correct.
I mean, if they're going right.
Yeah, they're the dominant factor, yes, really our personnel, I guess. Saying that.
And it's not just not utilizing the traffic light, it's also trying to avoid too many cars, frankly, going through a lot where you have cars you're trying to sell. And the more traffic you send through that lot, the more congestion for your customers and the more likelihood of damage of cars you're trying to sell.
Just you have all kinds of issues, safety issues, when the more you get cars going through a display space, so to speak. You have parents with their kids out there, and I don't know why. I've been on car lots for almost 30 years, and just kids just appear in the drive sometimes, and for whatever reason, people in car lots aren't looking for kids. It's not like they're thinking subconsciously that they're driving through a neighborhood or whatever. So we really try to be conscious and aware and try to have as little, whether it be employee traffic or customers leaving from service because they're in a hurry to leave or whatever, not maybe drive through some of those areas where the customers are typically going around, because just things happen. And so, trying to make it safe is the more release valves we have, the safer it becomes. That's all.
So if that curb cut that you're requesting was approved, northbound traffic on Colerain could not turn in there?
That's correct.
'Cause there's that
the
island in
already
there.
Yes, the island's already there. That's correct. It's simply.
We'll get to you, sir.
And just kind of a modest survey of our employees, a vast majority of our employees, when they leave, they are turning right to either actually go down Pool Road towards to Blue Rock and get on 275 there, or they're taking Cross County Highway one way or the other. But really, a minority of employees, they're actually going north on Colerain because they live that way. So.
Okay. I think at this point, we need a motion to go into public session. There are some people that may want to speak to this issue, so may we have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been seconded, or moved and seconded to open public session. If you could have a roll call.
Mr. Westphal?
Aye.
Ms. McMullen?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to that? Is it Mr. Freitch? Fritsch, okay, if you come forward, please, and could you please spell your name for the record?
Sure, my name's Tom Fritsch, Frietch.
Okay,
I'm the property owner on the corner of Colerain and Pool Road. It's a two-office professional building. There's the dental office, I'm the dentist, and there's Visiting Angel at Home Care. I mainly came here, I was concerned about the curb cut out on Pool Road, but that sounds like that's off the table. But I have a unique perspective in terms of them being real busy. I don't know Mr. Stein or anybody here, but I have, over the years, between my children and I, we have several Toyotas and Hondas. I'm right there in the corner. And I will tell you, both Honda and Toyota are very busy when you go to buy their car, especially towards the Compton Road curb cut there. And I'll tell you what they do, because I've confronted them. If you're going to test drive a car, a Toyota, and I've had them do this to me, you will go down, the salesman will take you down Colerain Avenue, take you right in the pool, turn to my parking lot, it's pretty congested. And I don't mind if they do that. I know why you do it, because they want to get the person oriented to that new car. And it's too congested, like he says, near the Compton Road cut out, you just kind of want to get out of there. The Honda does the same thing. There's other dealerships that do. And quite frankly, it kind of is, it's kind of a little pain, but I understand why you do. I have no problems with that. So I can see why he wants to keep that one small cut out there. And if I were him, what I would do, I would use that little cut out there when you test drive your cars, have those people use that like as an alleyway, have them introduce it to the car. What you do in my parking lot, do it right there, use that and take it right there. I think that'd be lots, it would help me out too, because I can't tell you the number of cars that come through there and turn around for dealerships. When I have people paint or build or do landscaping, they always say if I could charge $1 or $2 for every dealership that turns around your parking lot, I could make $1 million. So, and honestly, I have a very cramped quarters there. I think I have 21 parking spaces, and when they try to do that, it is sort of a pain. But you know, they're part of the township. I am too. I'm a business. I understand it, but I can see why he wants that. I really can for that reason. I don't know if you thought it out, but I would use that like little alley there just for people test driving the car. I really would, because it's very congested, both at Honda and Toyota, if you pull out the main Compton Road, you know, egress there. So those are my thoughts. So am I right? The Pool Road curb cut is out of the picture? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this topic? Hearing none, can we have a motion to close public session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close public session. A roll call, please.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Okay, at this time, are there any further questions or comments from the commissioners?
Yes, so for condition 5, for the driveway, is it proposed to be eliminated just because of the width being 10 feet, or?
It's a combination that it is non-conforming width, but also that the other driveways are non-conforming and oversized for this site.
How do the county engineers feel about this? I mean, do they want both the cuts gone?
I have not had a comment on county engineer on that.
This is going to come before us again in the form of final development plan, will it not?
Correct.
Okay. So if, just speculating, if someone makes a motion to approve this as presented tonight, between tonight and your presentation of the final development plan, could that curb cut issue change?
Not necessarily. The conditions that staff, I mean, if you adopt according to the conditions that staff has, that gets forwarded to our township trustees, and that is incorporated in the resolution that they vote on. And that is a legal binding, I don't want to say covenant, but it
has more teeth.
Yeah. You cannot do anything that is contrary to what the trustees have approved in that resolution. It would have to go back for an amendment to the trustees.
Okay. So, hearing that, I will entertain a motion for this item on the agenda, and whoever makes that motion, please clarify if there's any adjustment regarding the curb cut matter.
Can I ask one more thing, Al?
Sure.
I'm just trying to get this straight. Right now, they have a curb cut that is 21 feet?
I don't know if I had the widths of those curb cuts, the total
I thought they
width.
said the one was narrow, it needed to be 24, and it's 21, or?
Yeah, I mean, of the two that are on the main dealership site, the narrower one, I think is 30-some feet.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the two that we're talking about eliminating.
Oh, those are only about 10 feet wide each.
10 foot, okay. But we need, our minimum is 24.
Yeah. And the idea is that once a non-conforming building or site is cleared, that the redevelopment needs to conform to code standards.
So is there an option then of that going from a 10 to a 24 to fit the code?
We would prefer not to see that happen. Just because they have two very large access points currently.
But if this commission approved that third curb cut, it would then have to meet the code.
Not necessarily. You could approve it as according to what is on the plan, and that's the thing about plan developments. What you approve is that plan becomes the code for that site. So you're basically granting a variance by approving what they have on their plan.
Okay, but right now we have two 10s that are spread apart. Can we take that 210 and make 124 that is to code?
You could do that, but I mean.
You could, but that's not what your staff is recommending.
Okay. I'm just asking questions.
Right, the reason that I ask is as a driver who is on Compton Road, turning left onto Colerain, although there is a traffic light there, I call it confusion corner, because if you have their customers exiting, you don't know if you're competing with them. And I know that the traffic light situation has changed, but you still have that hesitation. So I could see having an additional exit south get rid of some of that confusion at that intersection.
I will ask the question again. If this commission approves that third curb cut, and as Mr. Faring says, make it 24 feet wide, will that allow your car transporters to get onto your property to unload their cars?
Well, first, I guess this is a point where I think you probably need to reopen the comment portion for us to be on record. But the answer to your question is I don't, transporters wouldn't be part of it. We're not proposing that as part of the equation.
Okay, all right. Just
We're
wanted
not
to-
even sure if they would agree to it, you know, we're dealing with union drivers there, and change is difficult for those guys sometimes. You know,
Okay.
Had the pool road been approved, it would have been a lot of work on our end just to negotiate with the transport companies for a new drop-off point. They're change resistant.
Okay, after deliberation, as we have been doing here for the last few minutes, is there anyone ready to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept case number ZA 2012-01 Joseph Toyota with the conditions and variances that are listed in the way staff presented it. Boy, that was rambling, wasn't it?
So you're making the motion to accept it as
Accept it.
presented by staff this evening?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Did I hear a second?
Yes.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Is there anyone who would like to encourage Mr. Westfall to change his motion in any way?
I think you have to accept the motion as it is.
Okay. Not hearing any, can we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Smith?
No?
Mrs. McMullen?
No.
Mr. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
No.
Mr. Grody?
No. So the motion does not carry. Is there anyone, any other commission member who would like to propose another motion?
I would like to propose a motion to amend the conditions to allow for the existing driveway access to remain.
As set forth in their plans.
As set forth in their.
You would like to remove condition number 5 regarding
the, one of the existing driveways be removed and the northernmost driveway remain.
Okay, before I ask for a second, Mrs. McMullen, are you proposing that in its current width, or are you putting a stipulation of the size it should be?
Am I able to put a stipulation?
You can make whatever motion works for you.
Then the stipulation that I would like is that it then meets the zoning code of 24 feet.
Okay, so let me clarify if I've heard you correctly. You're making a motion to approve this matter at hand, but to permit one additional curb cut of at least 24-foot width or whatever the current code is.
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody understand that?
No?
No? How can we help you to understand?
Well, I pretty much don't agree with the whole thing, so I don't know if you can help me. I'm just being truthful.
Okay. But you understand what she proposed?
I understand what she said, yeah.
Okay. Then do we have a second for this motion?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Mr. Kaler, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Faring?
No.
Mrs. Smith?
No?
Mrs. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
And Mr. Grody?
Yes. So the motion carries 3-2. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, moving on, any informal concept review?
Yes.
Old business? New business?
Just that we will see the land use element of the comprehensive plan. I guess it's more of an administrative update, so I apologize. I've jumped the gun here, but we'll see that here in the coming months for final adoption.
Okay. Administration?
There it was.
Okay, any announcements? Okay. Commissioners, any comments?
I got a question about Civic Center Drive. What are they doing on Civic Center Drive up there near the sheriff department and the library? That is Colerain?
It's Colerain, but that's a county roadway, I believe.
She's talking about the building, aren't you?
They're building, right, they're building something.
That's the educational center that's being expanded.
Yeah, when did they get their permits for that?
Gosh, a year ago.
They're expanding that educational center up there.
Okay,
We're adding on to it.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Next meeting is July 16th, 2019. At this point, does it look like we have agenda items?
I believe that we do, yes.
Okay. And may we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is closed at 7:55.
Am I too on? Am I too on?
They got what they needed.